I shall begin. Welcome to the Cambridge Agile Exchange. It's April, I think. It's already April. And tonight we've got Matt Jukes. He's here to talk about openness. Here's the vision of our group. We're here to talk about lean and agile methods and foster a community around that and to service your needs. We've got a code of conduct, which basically means be pleasant to each other, but there's a code of conduct there, please abide by it. And we're growing a community here, so we've got many ways of communicating with each other. I think we favour Slack. We've got a lot of activity going on there, but we've got a Facebook group too. Please join us in these areas and join in the conversation. So let's tell you about what might be coming up soon. So Roy Marriott will be running a workshop on solution-focused coaching, yep. And he's here, and you did agree to it? I'm not making this up. So there you go, solutions focus is an agile approach to coaching facilitation. So we'll be running this in a workshop style format, and we'll learn about the difference between solutions focused compared to traditional or other problem focused coaching techniques. Speak to Roy if you want to learn more about that. He's here.
Just to say, there's an emphasis on psychological safety in that. So if you're interested in that topic as being the key element in high-performing teams, that's the main focus.
Okay.
Cheers.
Thank you. So June and July are up for grabs. Simon and Marcus, who are founders of this group, want to tell you all about how to build a great team, how they did a team restart. You'll find out lots about how to build up a great team. Apparently it takes more than one day to get a team to performing. I'll tell you how to do that. We've left that as June or July. We've got some other pokers in the fire. Maybe we might be able to bring someone else along from either June or July, so we're working that out now. Oh, not thank you. Well, thank you later. At this point, let me just check. Yeah, it's definitely not. Over to Matt Jukes. He's going to talk to you about openness. What's that? Wi-Fi password? I'll get you a card with it on.
Hello? Cool. I don't ever trust these things. Right, so I'm going to babble for ages. So as you get bored, just heckle as you go along. You don't have to worry about interrupting my flow or anything. So I'll just talk. You can ask questions at the end, but feel free to ask as you go along. Because I don't know how long the talk is going to be, and apparently I've got over an hour to fill. So we'll have to see how that goes. But basically, I'm going to talk about my experiences and my heroes in kind of working in the open, and particularly from a kind of working in digital transformation and from an agile and sort of user-centric background. So, anyway, so I'm Matt Jukes. I'm almost always known as Jukesy. I spend far too much time on Twitter. I do a lot of blogging and that sort of thing, so I'm kind of out there. I've got a really boring job at the moment, so I spend even more time messing around on social media than is remotely healthy. And most of my career has been involved in kind of doing digital projects and digital work in kind of public service. So I've worked for various research councils, which is one of the reasons I vaguely know my way around Cambridge, because I always used to get sent here, which is a long way from Bristol. So, so I know a bit of that, but most recently I was probably best known. I spent 4 years running all the digital transformation stuff for the Office for National Statistics in this lovely corner of Wales called Newport, which if any of you have ever been there, you will understand what that's like. And then last year I worked for My Society, who are a civic tech organization who do fixmystreet.com, where you might have complained about a pothole over the years, and what do they know, which is where about 30% of all FOI requests to government come through. So I did that for a year, and now I'm wasting my life being a consultant, basically, but it pays well. So, but you could have found all of this out because I am entirely an open book. Like everything, good, bad, indifferent, certainly professionally, I share all of it, one way or another. I take a radical approach to openness from a personal standpoint. I've always traditionally said that is just professional, but as someone who pointed out recently when I gave one of these talks similar to this, that they found out through my blog that I got diagnosed with diabetes in the summer, in August. And I kind of forgot I'd done this, but I'd actually tweeted my results when I got them and blogged about it like a couple of hours later. So actually, people who knew me on Twitter and haven't followed my blog knew about my diagnosis sooner than my family, which they weren't pleased about. So actually, it does blur beyond just professional, that I do kind of generally take this approach in life. But it's my general hypothesis, what this is all about is that I think working in the open is the most important thing in making kind of digital transformation and agile working and all these things that we talk about. I think it's what makes it success. It's a secret sauce that actually adds value and actually makes all these kind of disparate bits that we kind of, once you've been in this for a while, you end up grouping lots of different things together in your head. You know, continuous integration and delivery and automated testing and agile working and user-centric thinking and all these stuff. It all just becomes a mix in your head. But actually, the kind of connective tissue, the thing that makes it work is kind of taking an open approach to all of that. Because I watch too many gangster TV shows, and I love Donnie Brasco, and I hate the phrase digital transformation, I've started calling it this thing of ours, which is what Al Pacino calls the mafia in Donnie Brasco. But as a general thing, I just think that it's that's the hypothesis. This is the hill I'm going to die on, trying to say this. I'm doing a version of this talk in about 8 different places over the summer. Just trying to convince a few people to take this approach, so we'll see how it goes. So it breaks down into kind of these 3 things. I'm going to talk a bit about what I mean by working in the open. I'm going to talk about some reasons why it's a good idea and how it helps. I'm going to then just talk about some people who are kind of organizations and individuals and projects who are kind of my heroes in this space. There's a gap at the bottom for a 4th thing, which is how, which I never get around to writing. So that's, if you're going to ask questions, ask about that, because I just don't ever get around to it. Sooner or later I'll have to, because it always is the thing that people want to know. So we're just going to see how this breaks down. So who here hasn't heard of GDS, the Government Digital Service? Yeah, okay, 1 or 2, okay. So the Government Digital Service, been around for 6 years now, 7 years, been around for a while, brought kind of all this kind of way of working to government in a time when it was pretty bleak. You know, when we were losing a lot of money to Fujitsu and IBM and projects weren't really working, and GDS came in to kind of bring a new approach, basically. All stuff anyone who does this kind of thing, anyone who's come to this kind of meetup would be completely familiar with. From my point of view, about the most important thing they ever did was one of the very first things they ever did, which published their design principles for activity, for what they wanted to do, and there were 10 of them. And the first one got all the praise. The first one was put users first, and that was citizens, not government users. And that's basically what focused everyone's minds for a really long time. This one was number 10, which was make things open, it makes things better. which was insanely radical for government. The idea that actually that civil servants were being encouraged to do things in the open, and they were genuinely open. So it was putting your code in the open. It was talking about your decisions in the open. It was sharing your approaches and your strategies as the thinking emerged. Now, I loved it because I was kind of doing that accidentally already and getting in trouble on a pretty regular basis for doing it. So this kind of endorsed my career previously and gave me a green light to carry on doing the sort of stuff I was doing. But it was a generally incredibly important thing, and like the stickers on my laptop still to this day. So there's lots of links in this. If nothing else, take photos of all the links. They're more interesting than me. And I've made sure that they're scattered all the way through it so that you get to learn something if I just bore you, basically. But before GDS, I'd found myself, I was a volunteer for Mozilla. So who doesn't know what Mozilla is? Yeah, cool, okay. So they make Firefox. So they're the foundation that does Firefox. This is their new, really terrible logo. Their previous one was better. But again, they're this amazingly open organization, and I kind of stumbled into it for one reason or another and found myself for 3 or 4 years being part of their volunteer team. And they, as you would expect, because they are one of the longest serving kind of open source organizations, they've got a really strong approach to openness. You know, A, all their stuff's on the wiki, and B, they've got a whole section of just how they approach working open. And at the time, you know, I'd come from civil service, my first go around at the civil service. So the idea of working in the open was completely new to me at that time. Like, I hadn't really engaged with Agile or anything at this point. So all of this was a bit mind-blowing for me. I also couldn't see how it could possibly work. Like, I was used to kind of working in a quite different way. And they have this, this is how they break down what they say working in open is, and it's always kind of stuck with me, and it's participation and agility, building momentum by working in the open, like doing your testing and rapid prototyping. The leverage one's quite interesting. Like, I have a particular view on how you use openness for leverage, which isn't to be recommended generally, in that I've got a habit of writing official blog posts about how I think things should work as if that's how they work. And then encouraging people to praise them to such an extent that my organization then embraces what I've been saying because it would look bad if they didn't. This can backfire. But when it works, it's brilliant. But this is a whole thing. So that's how I use leverage. I'm not sure that's what they meant, to be perfectly honest, but there you go. But more importantly, this is my favorite bit. They had this idea about what working in the open isn't. And these are the things that you mainly see, to be perfectly honest. And one is openness as public performance, or sometimes kind of open washing, like pretending you're doing open. Now, I have been a massive fan of GDS, and at times I've not been such a massive fan of GDS. And one of my reasons that recently I've been unhappy with them is because a lot of their blogging went from working in the open to public performance. And that was one of the things I was never as comfortable with. And there was reasons for it, and there are good reasons for it internally. But nonetheless, without them giving the context, it becomes performance. And I think that's a general thing you'll see with a lot of startups and a lot of kind of particularly kind of US Silicon Valley type companies. They'll be open as long as there's good news. Essentially, like they love to share the positivity, and they're Californian, yay, awesome. But you never actually, there's no authenticity to it because you never actually see the other side of it. Endless opinion sharing. Like, I'm obviously guilty of this, given I'm doing a tour and talking about this stuff. But being open is not being about being an effing thought leader. I mean, it isn't the same thing. Just because you've got an opinion doesn't mean you're being open. And recycling other people's opinions certainly isn't thought leader, isn't what open is about. And the bottom one is a pretty ongoing thing, I think, for lots of people, is lots of kind of leadership and kind of senior people see the idea of open as basically, an alias for getting things for free. So they think by throwing this stuff out and open source and open communities and sharing and stuff, just means someone's going to fix things for them for nothing. And that's it's a bit like early days of social media where people suddenly decided they didn't need advertising or marketing budgets or anything because social media, your Twitter account was going to do it all for you for free. These things, we've all seen how well that turned out. So I think that's another one of the things it definitely isn't. Every time I do a talk like this, someone suggests this book. It's Open Organization. It's not about Redgate, it's about Red Hat. I have to remember that given where I am. You can search it. It's a really famous book. It is all about all this sort of stuff. I've never finished it because it's really boring. Now the subject of it's really good, and the case studies, it's just the style of writing. I just don't like it, and I try, and I've got it on my Kindle, and I bought a hard copy, and I've tried to get one of those short versions of it. I really do try, but this is just to prevent anyone mentioning it later and asking me if I've read it. But the general thing with all of this is you have to people can smell when things aren't, the users can smell when things aren't authentic. So if you don't share the rough with the smooth, if you're not willing to be that open, then you're just playing at it, then it ceases to add any value. Look, what my experience has been with a lot of this stuff is, that particularly with blogging and talks and that kind of thing, is that what people learn from is the journey, not the destination. So when people go and look at your stuff, what they're interested in is how you got to the conclusion. They can read the press release and the shiny kind of moment and see the kind of final product to find out that. But actually all the value is the kind of twists and turns and ups and downs that took you to get there. And so, sharing that and being open about that and where you stumbled, that's where people learn lessons and that's where people get value. So why? This is going quicker than it should, just to warn you all. So finding your tribe. So I'm kind of a weird dude in general. So that's always been the great thing about the internet. We all know that. The whole thing about the internet is you get to find your tribe no matter how weird you're kind of, not kinky weird, but just weird. Like I'm a 45-year-old guy who still collects comic books, collects Adidas Superstar trainers ever since he saw Run DMC my Adidas a long time ago, and I've got a lot of pairs at this point. But also, professionally, I have a particular way of approaching everything. So I generally bought into this whole agile thing, lock, stock, and barrel a long time ago. I buy into service design and all that sort of thing. But also, I'm a little bit left-wing, so I buy into public service as well, as a general point. I had what was looking to be a nice cushy job at DEFRA, and then they asked me to run one of their Brexit digital teams, and I quit the civil service because I didn't want to do that. I didn't have a job to go to or anything, so I just, so I have a set of principles that don't always serve me well, to be perfectly honest. But also, I'm a middle-aged white guy in a profession where there's lots of work, so I'm privileged as fuck anyway, so who cares? But professionally, finding this, like the internet allowed me to find a slightly different tribe, a tribe that believed in all the same things I did about the work, but also the openness and stuff like that. So I do this thing called week notes. Has anyone ever done week notes? Anything like that? It's kind of old school blogging. So I actually discovered it because I had writer's block, and I'd always blogged a little bit, and I just couldn't get anything down. And it's this idea that, it's just once a week. You just kind of talk about what your week in work was like. What did you get up to? Any big meetings, ups and downs. It's like a weekly retrospective that you just kind of blog for yourself, basically. Never expected anyone ever to read them. I published them because publisher made me finish them. And it was mainly just for myself. It allowed me to clear my head. It got me over my writer's block. And then bit by bit, people started reading them and kind of asking questions and saying they were interested in different things. And it became part of my kind of working routine. And then bit by bit, other people started doing them as well. So people I kind of didn't really know well, or I might have just bumped into or met on Twitter. Do you really meet people on Twitter? But, you know, and bit by bit, it became this group. And then eventually there was kind of 20 odd people doing them who vaguely were related to the kind of work I was doing. So I set this little website up. I love silly websites with the TLDs that spell words. You know, I buy a lot of domains. You know, particularly, I don't drink as much now, which is good, because I used to wake up with lots and lots of domains. You know, that used to be my thing. You know, have a drunken conversation and then get onto Namecheap and wake up the next day going, what the? That's not even how you spell it. But. So anyway, now we've got Week Notes. So Week Notes is this community, and it's great. So basically, we run little meetups, and we have a WhatsApp group that supports each other, and we've been kind of, and we're a real different mix of levels in our careers and that sort of thing. So we've helped people have interview preparation and stuff like that, and we kind of just as a sort of supportive group. And some of the others in it are more personally open than me, so they've been able to get a lot of support for some quite major kind of family kind of issues, but it's been brilliant, and it kind of emerged just because of people being open and the group got together. But the weird thing is, there's this podcast called WB40, which I've never listened to. I don't listen to podcasts. Guy who runs it is another Matt, a guy called Matt Ballantyne, who I don't know. We've kind of met and chatted a little bit since, but he runs this podcast. He's been doing it for a few years, and at the same time as our Week Notes group emerged, a Week Notes group emerged with the listeners of this podcast as well. Now, we were inspired vaguely by the same thing, but we didn't know each other. Neither of us knew the other were doing this stuff. The formats are almost exactly the same. The groups do almost the same. They've got their own group, which they share and kind of support each other. And these things just kind of emerged along at the same time. It's one of those things where an idea just finds its space. And the only reason we know about each other is somebody we know built us a little Twitter bot that retweets the Week Notes hashtag, and we started retweeting their hashtag as well. We didn't, and I'm wondering who the hell they were because they weren't on our website. So we just got to know. So everyone's kind of shares kind of stories and back and forth now and experience, and they're all slightly different careers, but again, they're trying to do this openness. This is the one when I try to sell hiring professionally, corporately. So I'm pretty sure it's the same here, but it's the same everywhere now. Like, there's not enough good people to go around to do this kind of work. All we do is steal from each other, steal people. Everyone just does these laps around, depending on where you want to work. Everyone kind of knows each other. Whether that is good devs or good testers or good agile people or good designers, there just aren't, there's too much needs transforming, there's too much to be done. And so if you aren't paying the best salaries and you haven't got the shiniest offices and you don't have that kind of, you haven't got something special, you have to find a way to convince people to come and join you. Why would you take the risk? Now, if you're running a not exactly glamorous civil service development team in Newport, South Wales, you have to try and think of some way of like encouraging people. And I came across this thing called employee evangelism. Melissa Seckenton, she works for Future Learn Now. She does lots of presentations about this. She's amazing. There's a talk on if you search for this, you'll see the talk. There's a talk on Vimeo, which she gave at some shiny conference I would never get invited to. But it's an amazing thing, and it's this idea that at Future Learn, they knew they were competing for exactly the same people as not only GDS, but also like Moo.com and everyone else was. Everyone was looking for these same kind of skills, and they paid a little bit less because they were an academic organisation. They're funded by the OU. They had quite a cool office, actually, because they were in the British Library at the time, where they had terrible pink carpets, which I don't understand what design choice that was. But they started doing this thing where they really actively encouraged the people who were there to blog about their experiences, to do talks, to sponsor meetups, to get out and to talk and to be completely open about what was happening, good and bad, what the challenges were, what the opportunities were, and to talk about what had made them want to join, to talk about the mission. And it's surprisingly successful doing this sort of thing. We did a lot of it. The reason, I still hate public speaking. Like, if you'd have seen me before this, you'd have seen me like pacing the hallways and stuff like that. Like, this stuff still makes me feel sick. Like, doing it in bigger rooms than this, I literally am sick. You know, I've been doing it for a couple of years now. It does not get any better. I did it because I needed to hire people and I needed to change people's perception of the organization I worked for, because I couldn't deliver it otherwise, and I'd made promises. So I think this is an amazing thing. Like, we did it. We were able to bring build a whole new team at ONS, and almost it was something like 90% of people who were hired. We did a little, survey for them after, had come across one of our blog posts or seen somebody in my team speak at an event. I'd kind of heard it through word of mouth, but they were aware of our work and the changes we were making before they'd applied. So they weren't looking. So that's why they were looking for jobs at ONS rather than just stumbled on a job. So, and that was all because of the fact that we'd chosen to be open, and it was because we were authentic in doing so. In that we were open and we were talking about the fact that actually, look, you can join. We're brilliant. We're really trying. We're doing all this stuff, but it is still the civil service, and there is a bureaucracy, and you're going to have to do Java, and and there's a whole, and there are always all these things that you're going to have to get your head around, as well as all these benefits. And we were straight about it. We were clear that some people came in and bounced straight out. We let people come and spend a day with the team and stuff like that to get their feel for it. But it was an incredibly useful approach, and. Parliament Digital Service, Parliament are building their own digital team at the moment. They've taken it much further because they're trying to build something there, and their salaries aren't great either. And they're doing an amazing job because they've got an amazing mission as well, which adds a lot of value. Does anyone know GitLab? Anyone go? So GitLab are really cool. GitLab's whole staff handbook, everything is open. I think it's an amazing thing. So all of it. So everything from how you get promoted, what steps you have to go through, to how you get a blog post published, and paternity leave, everything in between. It's all entirely open. So basically, all those questions at the end of an interview when they say, "Have you got any questions for me?" and you forget, you can research it all before, so you know all the answers. Now, for me, what this taught me was I could never work for GitLab because everything I read horrified me. But that's useful to know. There's no getting around that. But I think it's an amazingly brave thing. It's just actually, none of that stuff should be behind a firewall. None of that stuff should be private, actually. It's useful for people who are interested. It's also useful for when you move on sometimes, to be able to, if you've gone somewhere else, to look back and be able to find some information about previous employees. I think it's just an incredibly useful approach to being open. This is a particularly government piece. But I still think of an amazing thing is, so for those who don't know, all new government code now that's been written for any government department has to be on GitHub. So basically, if anyone's added, so there's all sorts of gray areas around it, and people can find ways around it, but as a general principle, new code goes on GitHub, goes openly on GitHub. Now, 7 years ago, there was no government-owned code, like all the system integrators or whatever, or outsourcers that owned everything anyway. But the fact we've gone from that to the fact that you can go and find GitHub organizations for pretty much every government department with code that you can make pull requests on, that you can raise issues on, that you can see the work, is spectacular. I mean, it's always the thing that I wake up, it's the thing that I think I will wake up one day and it will all be gone. Like, this will be the thing that somehow that they change their mind and they just tell everyone to close all this down. But I think it's a genuinely remarkable thing. Like, the British government supported this for all, that they realized actually all those security concerns were nonsense. And actually that this was the best approach. And so Anna Shipman, who's a senior, I don't know if she's a technical architect or a developer or a tech lead or something now. Oh, this is yeah. But she wrote this amazing thing about all the open code resources and stuff like that. It's a great set of instructions. I mean, it genuinely is. I still think it's a bit of a miracle, to be perfectly honest. It hasn't worked in the way I think was expected to some extent, in that there hasn't been this massive uptick in sharing of code, of people picking up other people's work and reusing it. That didn't really happen. But just the fact that it's there has kind of inspired people to try things out and to do things differently, and you can learn from each other. There's a reason why it's always referred to as coding in the open and not open source, because it never really took that leap to open source. It didn't have the support, and it wasn't really encouraged to be for reuse in quite the same way. But I still think it's an amazing achievement. Sometimes I show a video there, but I'm not going to. Does anybody work in local government? Oh God, I can go for it now. No, I don't actually not anyway. I still go for it if they do. So part of my job last year, because I was running fixmystreet.com, and it's got products that gets sold into councils, was dealing with local councils. And they're just a prime example of it. It's not fair just to pick on them, but I'm going to. I've never experienced anywhere in life in general where the idea of not invented here is so prevalent as local council. Every local council is essentially the same, right? You're a local council, you know, county councils or district councils have pretty much the same responsibility. They all think they're unique, entirely and utterly unique. They absolutely, fundamentally do not believe they share anything in common with anybody else. And that ends up permeating all their staff as well, that they're the same. So we had clients, we had Bath and North East Somerset and Bristol, you know, as clients. They're slightly different, but not that much. Bath fundamentally did not believe that Bristol's product would work for them and asked for 100 changes. Right? None of them actually were that important changes, but they wanted them because they wanted to demonstrate to their councillors and everything else that they were different. This is a general thing across all of it. The local government do have, you know, everyone does have different demographics and they do have different issues and stuff, but their core offerings are the same. The core software they need to provide those offerings are the same. But it comes down to this idea of not invented here. And I think, and one of the amazing things, if you can get councils to work openly, is it changes the conversations. So Hackney Council are really interesting at the moment. So all their stuff's working in the open. They're doing some pretty major digital transformation work. They're changing lots of stuff. They're running all manner of projects at the moment. But they're doing almost all of them in the open. Much of it is either coded in the open, is actually open source code. Even when it's not, even when they're buying off-the-shelf products, they're actually sharing their reasoning behind it and what they've done, why they've done it. And also, they're pretty open with other councils about how much they're spending on things. Like, it's all out there. Now, so it's brilliant for Hackney residents. They're really going to make a difference, I think. I genuinely believe that. But also, it changes the conversation for all those London boroughs. Because you can no longer say you're unique. You can no longer say that this can't be done or it has to be done a certain way. If councillors or residents or whoever, or the local press, can literally look at the website of Hackney and see exactly how much something cost, when it was done, how it was done, and what it's serving, and then can click the link to see if it's any good, because it's all there. And so it changes this idea of, it removes this kind of smokescreen around not invented here, because it shines a light on the whole piece. This link continues to exist just because I really like it. It doesn't actually fit in with the bit I talked about before anymore. But, you know, that's the way these slides go sometimes. So designsystem.au is it's from the government version, the Australian version of kind of GDS-ish. And they've built this amazing resource of, Yes, it's a pattern library, essentially. It's codes and instructions and kind of patterns and stuff for all government websites over in Australia. So because basically they've got a slightly different model. The way things worked here is we had the government transformation in the UK had a little bit of carrot and a lot of stick, basically, because funding was controlled. In Australia, all the departments still control all their own funding. So if you want things to transform and move in the right direction, it's a lot of carrot and a little bit of stick, basically. So they've done this amazing job. They've built this spectacularly great website that shares it all. It's a bunch of stuff that couldn't possibly be done by them on their own to this quality. So now they're just encouraging people to take the opportunity to use it. Funnily enough, though, when I first gave this talk, this link was there in the morning. And when I gave the talk in the afternoon, when people started clicking it in, it had disappeared. Because it did turn out there was an argument amongst the Australian government where it exactly was someone else said they'd already done it, so they pulled the website down. So it both proved my point and then proved my other point in the same go without me realizing it. It's back now, though, and it is a wonderful resource. I've still got no idea what the image is about, but it's quite cute. It's a sideways gorilla, in case you're wondering. People couldn't tell earlier. So, looking sideways. So, one of the things, professional development in the civil service, if you're a civil servant, you're given 5 days. You're supposed to take 5 days every year to be a professional servant. I was quite a senior civil servant, and I'd never taken any days, to the extent that I got told off, that I was setting a bad example for my team because I didn't take the time. So, like, I'm bad at taking courses. I'm just rude to the presenters and stuff. I'm just bad. So I didn't want to do that. So I suggested that I would learn more if I just went and visited other teams who were doing the kind of stuff that I was doing. So meet other product teams, meet other agile teams, and not just in government. And I was told that as long as it didn't cost more than the course, the average cost of the course, and I didn't take more days than the days I was due, I could do whatever I liked if I organised it myself, basically. So it's again one of those benefits of doing all this stuff in the open. I wrote a blog post and I tweeted about it, and I got about a dozen offers to go and visit people from other government departments, from the BBC in Glasgow, the Children's Department, from a bunch of commercial kind of startup-y type places, a couple of agencies. And I went from, so it was the first time actually I've been to DVLA where I'm currently working. I saw their team. So I went from Bristol to Swansea to Glasgow to London to Cambridge to Brighton. And it was my kind of tour, essentially. And I learned more than I could ever have learned from anything else. And I shared it all back. So I blogged about it at each point and was open about it. And then introduced each of the people I met to the other people I'd met in doing it. And they all kind of got to know each other. And I just found, and then as part of the kind of Week Notes community and stuff, we encouraging other people to do this. And it's become a kind of way of a lot of organizations and a lot of these people are now is how they're treating their professional development, is doing this kind of looking sideways. And you're able to do it in a very unstructured and a very easy way because of the fact that everyone's working and open and sharing these ideas. So just throwing it out there means that the links can be made, that the network sorts itself out, which I think a lot of the kind of HR teams, both on one hand like, because it's less work for them to do, and on the other hand are a bit distrustful of actually what people are doing, but I think it's kind of growing in popularity. And this is as an individual, this is the finest example of it. This is a guy, Simon Wilson. He works for DWP, Department of Works and Pensions now, in Leeds, I think. He's worked in a few different government agencies until not long ago. So a few years ago, he was a really quite senior creative director for a bunch of agencies in the north, basically. He'd had a lot of senior jobs. He'd run his own agency. He spent a couple of years working in kind of digital and kind of advertising side of things in New York and that sort of thing. And for reasons I'm not quite sure about, he decided he wanted to do public service. And so he just kind of gave all of that up. And he also decided he was just going to be an interaction designer. He wasn't going to try and be head of anything. He was just going to get his hands dirty again and just try and help out. But he does a couple of amazing things. One thing he does is a certain percentage of his holiday days every year he makes available to visit any team who wants him anywhere in the country. So he just goes in and spends a day doing design crits or whatever, working with the team, helping them, help junior staff or anything like that, whatever they need from him, just to share his experience and to share the knowledge he's built up over the years. And he also keeps, I think it's I'm not sure if it's, at the moment it's a day a month, or he keeps a certain amount of his lunches free, which anyone can book. He uses an online website, so if you want advice or talk about your career, and if you're a student, or if you're actually just wanting to change careers and you want to get into UX or design and stuff, he just puts that out there, just makes it available, and anyone can book it. And some of them end up, he mentors them for a while and stuff like that, but he just does all of this completely in the open, and just to try and give back to the community, which I think is more than I do, to be fair. Publish, don't send. So this is a one where I think there's a thing where that I truly believe that if you've written something that's important enough to send to more than 2 or 3 people in an email, you probably should have blogged it or put it somewhere. I think inboxes are where corporate knowledge goes to die, generally. Because people leave, no one can find it, search doesn't work properly. It's just a bit of a graveyard. And like every place I've ever worked that's got more than about 50 people has problems with kind of like knowledge, like organizational memory and kind of knowledge management. And like every intranet is shite. Like, I've built some of them, but they don't ever, they get to a certain scale and they don't go well, and it all ends up being a problem. I think the reality is, for most things, publishing stuff on the web works better, and it's findable for you because because Google's a better search engine than your one on your intranet is the reality. It also forces people to write things better. People spend a bit more care if they're going to write something that's going to get published than they do if it's only going to be in an internal file system. It's just a reality. And you have that advantage where you can vaguely remember somebody wrote this and it might have been this person who wrote it, and you'll be able to find it, which is brilliant. But also other people can stumble across it. So other people having the same problems, having the same issues, wanting to learn the same things can stumble across what you've published. So you improve the general ecosystem in a way that actually just sending it around a few kind of people internally doesn't. It also saves time in the long run. It's a lot quicker after you've done it once just to fire out the same URL over and over again when you've got to tell people that actually we don't support iPhone apps, for example. Having someone write that blog post saved me a lot of emails for quite a couple of years. So in theory, although there's a lot of debate about this, but in theory I'm a product manager. Professionally, I tell people I'm a product manager. Various people would no longer believe this because I'm a bit shit at writing user stories because I've been a manager bit of it for too long and not the product bit for a thing. But the bit I love most about being a product manager is I love roadmaps. I love doing roadmaps. I love the whole workshop of it. I love messing around with the new tools. I love doing them on big walls. I love all that kind of side of it. I love all the kind of the strategic bit. But one of the things that I've become increasingly aware of in the last few years is just how incredibly powerful having open roadmaps is, and how doing these things out in the open and getting them out as early as possible and allowing people to see the evolution you're thinking via roadmaps as the illustration of that. Because it removes so many questions. It removes so many of the kind of day-to-day stakeholder. I usually tell people to count how many times I say the word stakeholder, and then I'll pay a fine or something after. But you know how much the kind of the powers that be their questions, because actually if you can just send them something that they can see, So they kind of understand what's happening. You know, it doesn't have to be dates. It should never be dates. But you kind of now, soon, later kind of thing and get a feel for what's going on. It really does. It changes the quality of questions you get asked. It changes the tenor of the questions that you get asked. You can cheat sometimes. One of the things again, this is something, you know, you do to your peril. But we kind of gave people the impression they could vote on certain parts of the roadmap and that would push things up and down. It couldn't. I was never going to listen to their choices. But I gave them that idea. Sometimes it met with what I was going to do, so they thought they had some influence, so that was fine. But at least it kind of kept them busy. But I think as a general thing, they're an incredibly powerful tool. Again, so this is Future Learn Again, who Melissa works for, but it's a different team. They've recently written like a series of about 8 blog posts about roadmaps. And they're brilliant. So they basically have got they've got a product management team. They asked their product management team, each of them picked a bit about roadmaps that they wanted to write about. It is a fantastic set of blog posts. It's better than any book that's out there about this topic at the moment. It really is very well done. And it is well worth a read, even if you're not interested in each of the different posts. Like 1 or 2 of them will almost always be of some interest, I think. Yeah, and this is the most important thing. The most important reason for being open. I absolutely, 100%, with all my heart, hate networking. Like, so much. Like, I literally went all the way to Miami once for a conference, got so intimidated in the first break by all the kind of American networking that I hid in the main room for the whole next 2 days of the conference and didn't come out. Like, brought snacks to the conference. Like, and I will almost inevitably, at any event I'm not speaking at, spend the whole time in breaks in a corner on my phone with my massive oversized headphones on, like with a wall around me, basically. I am not good at it. But on the other hand, I'm quite a senior guy now. I've been doing this stuff a long time. It's part of my job to do these things, especially now I'm a consultant. Not that I know what that means. But I have to do these things. And what I discovered, and I discovered it entirely by accident, because I got into all this public speaking for the reasons I said before about ONS and stuff. And all the blogging, mainly, the reason I started doing that was I always wanted to be a writer. I got an English lit degree. I thought I was going to write the great novel or something. Turned out I wasn't. Learned that pretty early. But I love to write, and the fact is, no one can stop you publishing on the web, can they? Like, it was never going to get published anywhere else. So that's why I started writing on the web. So, but doing it this way, bit by bit, what I started to realize was that I didn't have to network because people spoke to me. Because if you speak at events, either they agree with you or they don't, or they want to talk to you about what you've said or anything. So it takes all the introductions, takes all the small talk, takes all the things I find painful entirely out of the equation. All the weak notes I write and stuff like that, and all my Twitter stuff. If people follow me or anything like that, they think they know me. So they come up and they talk to me about stuff that's happened. So again, you bypass all the other kind of get to know you stuff, because it can be a bit weird sometimes when you've never met somebody and they know what you did the previous weekend. But at some point you get to come to terms with it. But it takes all the pain out of it. And it turns out this is a thing. It wasn't me discovering that. If you Google introvert speaking at conferences or something, there's a whole kind of community where people talk about their different approaches to this and the reasons they do it, and it's almost always the same reasons. It's that they were absolutely useless at conferences and events and networking events until they realized that they could control this part of it. So you can write it and you know what you're going to say. Oh, no, don't do that anymore. But you have the slides and you control this environment, and then everything comes to you after that without having to worry about the stress of it. That ridiculously nonsense astrology for managers thing, Myers-Briggs, that whole stupid things, has a whole part of that that supports this. It doesn't change my opinion of the fact that it's nonsense, but at least I'm not alone in thinking this is an idea. So yeah, so this is the thing. So this is my one thing. If you're an introvert and you find these things hard, it is worth trying this. It's worth trying to do, and to do this kind of thing, do talks at meetups, where there's a friendly group, where actually the whole thing about doing these kind of talks is everyone's on your side. It's not quite the same if you go to a conference and everyone's paid £500 or something or more, because like they want you to be good. But something like this, you've got the pizza, and you know, as long as I don't completely ruin it, you're all right, aren't you? So, so this is me just now. I'm just going to talk about some of my heroes in this space, and a few links to kind of things I think are interesting. So Will Middleton was, until recently, user researcher again at GDS. Had worked for a company before that, CX Partners, who I'm friends with the founders and stuff. So it's quite an interesting thing. So Will spent about 2 years talking about the fact he was going to blog and tweeting about the fact he was going to blog, and then never really blogging, or blogging once or twice that weren't very interesting. He won't mind you saying that. And then suddenly, like some dam burst. And part of that was because he resigned and he was working his notice, so he was kind of getting things off his chest a little bit. But he wrote a series of just remarkably personal, but also incredibly useful blog posts. This one was all the things he wished he'd have done different over a series over the last few years in the role he was coming to the end of. And it's, it's useful because it shows all the common kind of bumps you can take in that kind of role. But also it's incredibly fun because he talks about how he would have fixed it. So actually, he talks about how he would do things differently, who he's learned from since, how he would approach it differently. It's but it's quite raw as well. Like, he does he shares a lot and is a bit hard on himself, to be perfectly honest. Has anyone come across Dan Hon? So Dan is a Brit. He lives in Portland, I think now. Does kind of digital stuff. He's had quite an interesting career. He's a qualified lawyer, and then he did some kind of game stuff in digital, and then some advertising stuff. Worked for Nike and things like that. Then government digital stuff, and I don't quite know what he does really now. But he writes this newsletter. It kind of comes and it goes now. It was really regular for quite a long time. And it's this incredible, he's an amazing writer. So that makes a difference because a guy can just write. But he basically does stream of consciousness. Like, he clearly just sits in a cafe sometimes, and anything that he's been thinking about for the last week or so just comes out, and then he just sends it to like a couple of thousand people in his newsletter. But it is amazing. So sometimes you get these incredible, quite personal stories. Like, he's diabetic and he's had some mental health issues, and he's got his family over there and stuff with healthcare in the States and stuff. Other times, incredibly insightful posts about artificial intelligence or digital government or business models in digital and all sorts of things. Like, really, a proper guy who can really think. Other times you get really weird fiction stories based on some random tweet he's read, and you only realise halfway through that it's turning into a story, and it's not just him riffing on some idea. But it's an incredible thing, and you get to, I've never met him in person, but I'm meeting him in a couple of weeks in Portland. So we've kind of got, again, it's one of these things we've got to know each other through, because he reads my week notes, I read his thing, we go back and forth, and we know people in common. But it's going to be another one of those weird things. We're going to feel like we know each other, we're about the same age and everything, but actually we've never met. And it is all through the kind of this approach to being open. And this is a kind of another extreme. So Cassie Robinson works for .everyone, which is a digital charity that was founded by Martha Lane Fox, who she's Dame something now, I can't remember, but she founded lastminute.com and various other things. But Cassie did this amazing thing, which is a user manual for me. It's a kind of whole thing. And it's turned out that it's part of a much bigger kind of thing out there in the world. But basically it's for when you meet new colleagues, when you join a new organization. It has this whole kind of thing, is like, how do I like to work? How do I like to receive feedback? You know, when am I best? When am I not? What time in the morning? And she just wrote this entirely like cool, and did it in a quite nice format as well. That meant that if you read it, the day you met her, you'd understand how best to work with her. And I've got a lot of colleagues who've started doing this now, people out there doing it when they join new jobs and do kind of introduction things. And weirdly, one branch of the St. John's Ambulance somewhere is asking all of his new people to do it now. That they ask them all to do it and share it amongst themselves so that everyone understands straight away without, so they don't have to ask someone to stand up and do a kind of intro. They write this thing and get shared. I think it's an incredibly useful, like it won't work for everybody. Like my devs didn't like the idea, it has to be said. But I think we're just trying to find a model that does work. Like I didn't choose this photo of Mel, this is her choice. So Melody Kramer is, she's a writer from the US. She now is head of comms or something for Wikipedia. She works in government. She worked for NPR in the US, so National Public Radio and stuff like that. She is another one of these people who had made an absolute decision that she was going to work in the open. And like her whole career, like she applies for jobs in the open. She basically, when she got the job at Wikipedia, she was leaving government because of the change, because Orange Man got in. And she basically just wrote to organizations she'd like to work for. She didn't look for jobs out there or anything. She wrote to them all. And in the letter she wrote to them saying, these are my skills, I'd like to work for you. And she just linked them back to a public, open letter that she'd written online about what her skills and this is how I work and that sort of thing. And then she got a job at Wikipedia. I'm not sure it would work for everybody, but it was an interesting thing to see how she did it and how she worked in that way. And she does work in the open. She has brought that kind of approach in lots of places where she works. And she does have this incredible thing where professionally, she is genuinely all out there. She talks about her ideas and her career and her ambitions and the ups and the downs and everything. But she is very good at maintaining a firewall, so the kind of, a little bit about her personal life, but very little. I very much suspect it's a much harder place to be open if you're a woman on the internet than it is if you're a middle-aged white guy, to be perfectly honest. But she does it brilliantly and seems to handle all the kind of slings and arrows that comes with it. So this is an interesting one in general. So Greenpeace International are rebuilding all their web presence, all their online stuff, public-facing online stuff, in all the various languages that means, but also doing it culturally sensitively, depending on the different kind of areas and stuff. They've done the whole thing in the open, at every step of the way. They've shared decisions, they've shared all their wireframes, they've shared design ideas, like their arguments about what would work and what wouldn't have been kind of shared openly. It's being managed by a woman called Laura Hilgeder, I think is how you say her surname. But she's another veteran of Mozilla. So we kind of met years ago there, but her career went in a slightly different direction. And but it's been really good because obviously it's a charity. It's slightly different. They've got a very different relationship with their members and with their employees and their supporters. There's a lot of people to kind of juggle in those relationships. A lot of people have got very strong opinions. Those opinions are quite different in different parts of the world. They have a different relationship with Greenpeace as an organization. And there's a lot of people who are quite anti it as an organization as well. So to do all this in the open in the way they've done, it was quite a brave decision, I think, particularly because it hasn't been a smooth project necessarily, and they didn't back away from continuing to do it this way. But it has been quite successful. The project has ended up being successful, and so was this as a kind of record of that. I was obviously going to shout out my old team. So So I basically burned out entirely in a pool of, you know, God knows, fat, basically, when I left ONS. I spent 4 years, I ran this program for them, and then ran away to New Zealand, like literally ran away to New Zealand because I was a gibbering mess. But we'd worked this whole project, all the stuff I'd done there when I was with them, we did it all in the open, we did the talks, we blogged about everything, we were on GitHub, we did everything, what we could. And then I left, and then they got 100 times better. So basically I was holding them back. I thought I was showing them the way, and it turns out I just needed to get out of the way. As soon as I was out of the building, they just got loads better at all of it, basically. So they have taken on and done an enormous amount more work on some quite complex stuff. And they share everything in the open. So they still, they anonymize their user research and put it in the open. They talk about all their sprints and put it in the open, all their results. Like everything they do is on this GitHub pages. They put their prototypes up when they're trying new things. You know, they encourage people to look at it. Their roadmap is open. And it's a weird thing. So as a corner of the kind of internet, it's a very nerdy part of the government. It's the Office for National Statistics. But it's also incredibly important to a bunch of important people. So like it wasn't unusual for me to be phoned up and shouted at by quite senior people at the Treasury and the Bank of England and places like that, you know, and the FT and people who have a lot of sway in this country's economy. Shouting at a relatively non-senior civil servant was a bit unsettling. And there's a lot of people who care very deeply about all the things that happens, and have too much time on their hands generally, to be honest, because they are able to talk about it a lot. So to do all this in the open, and to keep doing it, and to keep doing it after some decisions were made, which annoyed lots of these people, I'm very proud of the way that the team continued the work and the way that they improved everything. It is. Like I can't take very much credit for it, but I try. Who knows? This is Dan Barrett. Dan Barrett is Dan Barrett is a kind of almost rock star. But he's also the world's only, apparently, I got to always say the world's only, head of data and search at the UK Parliament, for the Parliament Digital Service. So Dan's one of the guys who does week notes with me. He does a lot of kind of sharing. He literally was, he was in a semi-successful band and stuff like that. Last time I did this talk, I just called him a god, which wasn't what I meant to say. I didn't mean to say rock god, but someone tweeted at him, and I'm his favorite person now because I said he was a god in a session. But he's an amazing guy. Parliament is changing, but it's still an incredibly stuffy place. It's still a place where change comes slow, where the risk aversion is high, and yet his team have been incredibly open throughout this entire project, where they're trying to do some pretty gnarly things. The kind of what they're trying to do with data and to change the approach is, it's upsetting a lot of people who've been there a long time. It's a big leap for the organization. And it's encouraged lots of other people that, the other parts of that digital service and the House of Commons library and stuff have all got more open off the back of it as well. It's had this kind of cascading effect around, which I think is kind of amazing, really, given the place. I thought I'd throw a couple that weren't government in, just because, So, who remembers the Netflix slides? Okay. So, for those of you who don't remember, so like one way or another, whether it was on purpose or not, this slide deck that discussed the Netflix approach to the community and how ways of working and stuff, leaked about quite a few years ago, 7 years ago or something now, maybe even more. And it was this incredibly radical thing at the time. I mean, it still is strangely radical because actually things haven't caught up as much as you might have expected. But it talked about they didn't have holiday, and they had a flat structure, and how they treated their staff and how they recruited and their kind of ways of working and all this sort of thing. And it exploded, basically. And it did more to attract the kind of people that they wanted to the organization at the most important time of their transformation than anything else. Now, I firmly believe the whole thing was set up to do that it was always supposed to leak, and it was always supposed to be in the open, because that was what was going to change people's, because it was at that very moment when they were swapping from, waking up in the morning and finding out you had the wrong couple of DVDs waiting for you. So you had, disc 3 and 4 of 24 and not 1 and 2. And before they'd shifted to fully streaming, and they were trying to change everything about their organization. And this document kind of set the standard for that. And it being in the open is what attracted the kind of talent that they needed to make that happen. Everyone know Buffer? So Buffer are quite famous because it's slightly different. So they're not so much openness, they're transparency. So they famously share all their staff's salaries. So if you join, it's just open. Everything's open. It's open you can go on the website. You can find out how much everyone earns. I still don't think that's a thing that would fly easily in the UK, to be perfectly honest. But also everything else, like their board meeting minutes are available. Everything you can think of about kind of corporate responsibility, their decision making, their interview questions, everything. They're a fully transparent organization. You can go on their website. Like, much of it is quite boring, to be perfectly honest, because that's the nature of it. But there are some gems in there. But they see themselves as that being their kind of their mission statement as an organization is to maintain that. Right, you'll be glad to know this is the last slide, I think. So 18F are kind of my heroes in all of this. So it's a completely stupid name. 18F is a government department in the US. They're on the corner of 18th and F Street in DC, so that's what the name is for, which is a weird name for a government team. But they're kind of an in-house digital agency. So other bits of government across the US federal government can essentially hire them to do user research or product management or development, and they work in an agile way. They do all the kind of things you expect. They actually have to compete. So they don't compete on price, but they have to compete on quality with other suppliers as well. They have to go through bids and stuff. They just can't be handed work. But they do all this in the open. They share. They have this amazing thing, guides.18f.gov. This is 100% my main thing that I go to for almost everything in my career. This is my main resource. It's got things in there about product management, about agile approaches, about DevOps. It's got templates about how to encourage people to write blog posts, which work amazingly well. They've got like new product launch ones and new member of staff ones, and just these headings. And they're so simple that you can give someone who's just whined about you trying to ask them to write a blog post for weeks, and you give them these sets of headings, and they're just it just works for people more than anything else I've ever tried. You still end up having to turn it into English for most of the people I ask to write, but they get most of they get things down in a way that is quite rare. But they do all this, they got in trouble with security in the States for using Slack. And rather than just not use Slack, they worked out how to fix it, and then they blogged about how they got around it, and they told other people how to do that. And so they work in the open. Can you imagine how hard it must be to work in the open in the current US federal government? When you're working for a federal government that doesn't believe there should be a government. I mean, the fact that any of them stayed, the fact that they're still trying to do this, the fact they're still trying to stay true to the principles they had previously, I think is remarkable. I have one complaint, is that the person I was closest to there before Trump got in was going to get me in to see, because to go around the White House. But when Trump got in, they quit. So my one chance to have my West Wing moment and pretend I was, Toby Ziegler walking around, blown. Never going to get that again. I was only, all she had to do was win one more state, and I would have been having my moment. But there you go. And that is it. That's my slides. I don't know if they're still there, actually, so probably should get past that one. Okay? Yeah, cheers. And thanks. I'll answer any questions.
So, any questions? We'd like you to use the mic if all possible. I'll go over here first.
No, don't give him it.
So go on then, how do you do it?
Yeah. So I think so my main answer to this is usually that any crack is a win. So any crack in the door is a win. So any of these things, anything that you can successfully get out starts to open the door. Now, again, one of those things where it's one of the reasons why there isn't a how section in this. All the times I got this to work really well was because the place was burning down. Each time it went, so basically, could have done anything if you convinced them that it was going to fix things. So that's not exactly the situation you want to go into. But I think, I do believe that sprint notes are the easiest way to get in. Like, if you can convince like, most people don't notice if as a team, no matter where you are, you start writing regular notes about the ups and downs of your project, because most people aren't that interested. But if you start doing that and you get into a kind of regular cadence of that and it becomes part of how you work, it's kind of, that gets a little crack in the door, and then you can start, and then as the crack gets in, you can make it wider and wider and talk a bit more about some of your decisions and some of the choices you've made. And, it is, in government particularly, it's a different environment than it was a couple of years ago. There's different leadership, there's Brexit, there's a whole bunch of things that makes it harder than it was. It's a reason I'm not in government at the moment, to be perfectly honest. But I think in the private sector, as long as you're sensible, like there used to be a thing in social media, like the only rules you needed for social media was, don't be stupid. Like, I still fundamentally believe that. I think people know what they can and can't share, but you should. But if you think you can share it, you should. People second guess themselves too much, and I think there's more could be out there.
You still got your hand up? Come back. There you go.
So what you've described, I think, starts with an act of altruism, where you're putting your communications, your resources, your thoughts and ideas up for public consumption. Yeah. And I can see that in public serving bodies that has value, because nobody's going to come in and get rid of you because they've got a better idea running that department necessarily. But one of the challenges I think you've got for private sector organisations is they're going to say intellectual property and what will the shareholders say, and we can't open these things up. How would you respond to that?
So I think on those rare occasions where you've got some unique intellectual property, I think that's fine. Like, I haven't come across that very often in my life as a general thing. I think the fact that many large internet age companies are able to work pretty much in the open to some extent or another makes a lot of those arguments less valid than they were. I do understand them. I understand people worry about giving a competitive advantage away, and little people know what their strategies are and what kind of decisions they're going to make and stuff. But I also think people give themselves too much credit in some of that space. And actually, your competitors knowing that you're interested in artificial intelligence, I mean, who the fuck isn't? Like, there aren't that many new ideas. And I do think a lot of the time it is just, it's more about convincing those people that you're not going to, it's a trust thing. I think a lot of it comes down to them not believing you aren't going to put something that genuinely is commercial in confidence out into the world. And I think it's trying to get over that hump more than the kind of broader, the IP or the kind of strategic side of it. It's more that they think you're going to blow some deal by somebody leaking something a week before it's supposed to happen. And I think that comes down to, you probably still, in that space, you do need a bit more process and a little bit more thinking around it. But for most places, there's a continuum anyway. And most places aren't sharing anything at all at the moment. And I'm over here somewhere. There's a lot of space in between for people to kind of open up and share. And I'm also not sure, so I do it for altruism, my personal stuff. But I think a lot of the rest of it isn't so much that. I mean, if you're working on anything internet related today, you're working on top of the fact that people were open. Like the whole fact any of us have got jobs, the fact that Agile exists is because people shared those ideas. The fact that, the fact that internet exists is because of that. The fact that the web exists is because of that. I mean, if you think you're better than all the people who came, if your organization is better than all the people who came there, then you're probably in the wrong game. There are other things you can go. You can go, design shipping containers or something. I don't know. Well, that's open as well, isn't it? Now? So, but there, that's it. But it's a hard slog. There is no getting around it.
Okay.
So, sorry, yeah. So the question was, in your experience, what was the reluctance or resistance you faced when you wanted to, introduce openness in a particular organization? How did you overcome it? And maybe as a senior consultant, it might be easy for, kind of saying, here's how you open it. But from a lower, as a programmer, how can I encourage openness in my organization, for instance?
So I think so I'm quite senior now, and I'm not that senior still really. But I wasn't necessarily when I started doing lots of this. I think there's levels anyway. I think as a programmer, I think at that software engineer, actually I think there's more room to be technically open in that space a lot of the time. Because a lot of your managers won't know what you're talking about. So you get yeah. But as manager, so I think so again it's a burning platform thing a little bit, I guess. So at ONS it was just like and the other parts of the government I've worked in, it was very much about the fact that everyone understood that the perception of that organization had to change, that you could not recruit the right people, you could not make, no one would trust you that you were the right people to do the job unless people felt differently about your abilities in that space. And the only way you could do that was to start speaking about the fact that you did know what you were doing. So that was how I pitched the whole thing. And it took a long time. I had a lot of meetings and to be, again, this isn't a great example, but at ONS, in the end, I set up a WordPress.com blog, convinced somebody to map ons.gov.uk domain to it, and skinned it myself so it looked official, and started blogging, and got my team to start blogging. And it took 3 months for the organization to realize it was happening. So by that time, it was just, and a bunch of people at GDS who were quite senior at the time started retweeting my post saying how good it was, because I'd asked them to. And suddenly it was kind of a done deal. But the organisation, I didn't get in any trouble for that. I got in trouble for other things, but I didn't get in any trouble for that one. But I think, a lot of it is to find something that they care about and that the managers and the senior people understand is a problem, and to offer them a solution that is related to openness. So recruitment and retainment was a disaster for ONS, but also all the kind of, they'd blown all goodwill and trust from their audience as well, because they were getting beat up. ONS was so bad there was a parliamentary investigation into how bad their IT was. That's bad. But they weren't answering. So basically they were taking all the hits and they were accepting it all because they didn't know how to respond in a way that wouldn't look defensive. So they just didn't do anything. So what I offered them was a bunch of channels and a bunch of opportunities to change that conversation. And then I used it for my own means after that, basically. But I think that's it. You just have to find that kind of equation where you've got something to offer. Because most of the stuff's pretty easy. Like all your, you'll have, on the technical side, people will have things they want to say. Like on the Agile side, some of it isn't exactly mind-blowing, but most places have got one take or another different on Agile. They might want to share a different way they're doing stand-ups or a different way that they're running retrospectives. Actually, and there's an audience for this stuff, so actually getting a couple of non-controversial things out of the door, but that aren't generic, that are about how your organization does stuff, does get things moving.
Cool. Time for two more, I think. Number one.
Right, thanks for the talk. I've got lots of stuff rattling around in my mind. Something I would like to ask you is there an impact to your personal well-being or mental health by being so open? I mean, I sort of see more and more concerns about social media and the way it's breaking down sort of social structure and people's ability to relate to each other. I wonder how you thought about that in the context of being open.
So it's absolutely a valid thing. Like I think there are issues with it. But actually, I've had some mental health issues, but they were, and it's hard to unpick whether it was the openness or the work. So I burned out quite badly and ended up in pieces. Like genuinely, it was not good. It took me a year to put myself back together again. I don't know, if I'm honest, I don't know whether the level of openness helped or hindered in that. It's hard to unpick at this point. Like actually later on, the openness helped put me back together again. So the community and these people and the fact that by being open about it, I found that other people were being through similar things and how did they cope and realized it wasn't just me and didn't feel so bad. All of that really ended up helping. And me doing that helped other people. Whether it contributed as well to me getting into that mess in the first place, I don't quite know. I mean, I don't suffer from it in the same way, I guess. There have been very few negative connotations directly that I can identify from my openness. Like I've never had problems. I've never had issues online with kind of any bad actors or anything. I've only ever really had support from doing this sort of thing, one way or another. So I think I probably got off quite lucky from that sort of thing. But it's definitely an issue. I definitely know a lot of my friends who've been similarly open, have had to go the other way. And at least one of them does, for a couple of months every year, goes offline completely. It's like open for 10 months and then has a kind of shuts down basically for November and December every year to give themselves a break from all of it that goes away online totally, as it calls it Black Ops or something. But he announces he's going to do it, like he's still at work and everything, but on a certain day goes away, his newsletter stops, he's off of Twitter, he doesn't blog anymore, comes back in early January every year, and that seems to help him. But yeah, I don't know. It is something I monitor now in a way that I never used to. I kind of keep a track of my mood swings and stuff like that, and to see if there are any factors. And my activity online is one of the things I do keep an eye on, as well as my kind of working hours and stuff like that now. But it's not obvious at this point. For me, that they're related, but they certainly are for others.
Okay. One more. Coming over here. It's on.
Hiya, thanks very much for your talk. So I think you've talked about openness, like as for your organisation, like being open about what your organisation that you work for is doing and speaking kind of on behalf of the organisation, and then also openness of yourself, of your own, I know brand is a bit of a crap word, but your own sort of identity. And do those two have to go hand in hand? Can you be, like I was thinking, I'm never going to get away with talking about to airing my organisation's dirty laundry in public, I'll get into big trouble. And if you're like dipping your toe in the water of this, because I'm not particularly open normally, does it stop being open if I say I'm working for acme.com, you know, or do you know what I mean? If my employer, who I won't mention, you know, that kind of stuff.
So I think I think for the weak note side of it and that openness, like I think it's anything that you think helps you on that side of it and the other. So one of the jobs I had when I was at My Society, I created code names for all my clients. So people knew I worked for My Society, but when I talked about my wider work, I had my own key for a bunch of things, but like I never mentioned anyone I worked with or anything like that. They all had code names. The code names weren't related at all. They were randomly picked ghost towns in the USA. And I used them for different places I worked for not dissimilar reasons. Like my business, my openness shouldn't impact on them. So I think there's a thing that you can be open about how you're feeling, about how work's going and that sort of thing without talking about your work. Like my weight notes, I don't mention, I talk about whether things are going well or not, or how I'm feeling, or complaining about the trains is a common theme, and but things I've learnt and things I'd like to do different, and times I'm disappointed in myself. But I will rarely talk about colleagues unless they've agreed, and I only ever use first names if I do. I don't name the organisation I currently am based at. Like, it's not hard. Like, I'm working in Swansea on a big government department that deals with cars. I mean, you can put shit together, but you know what I mean. But if they search it, they're not going to find it. So I think it is. I think there's, you know, I think there's a continuum, and I think actually part of it is, I think the weak notes thing. Like, no one knows you as well as you, so you know your points where you're comfortable with, and it's easy. And you become a better writer if you write all the time. If you write every week about the topic that you know really well, it just helps. And then you get into a rhythm, and then other opportunities when there might be something you do want to share, you're ready to share. Is kind of how I feel about it. And the other thing with week notes is, I have to remember to say this. So it's a note about your week, not a note every week. So lots of people do try to write them every Friday, but actually it's not about that. It's, you know, it's writing them when it's useful to write it, and then writing it about the week, and that's kind of it. Well, I think that's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's time.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Cheers all.